On Christmas Day, they said I was too old to join. "We don't have room this year, Grandma." So I spent it on a yacht I owned. I raised a glass of champagne, alone, but free. It was Christmas Eve, and I was 80 years old, wearing my old red sweater that had once been too large for me, but now clung to my thinner frame like it was trying to hold me together. I stood quietly near the long oak table, watching the candles flicker across the silverware. My hands were trembling slightly, not from age, but from the weight of everything I was carrying inside. I held a ceramic plate with care, and in my pocket, the linen napkin I had embroidered myself when I still had the steadiness for needlework. The room was warm with the scent of roast beef, cinnamon, and the sugary sweetness of mulled wine. Laughter filled the air. The children ran circles around the legs of adults who barely noticed. I stood behind the last chair, not yet seated, not yet acknowledged. Then she spoke, my granddaughter-in-law, with a smile too polished to be sincere. "Oh, Grandma, this section's for adults now." She said it like a joke, but no one laughed. Jeremy did not look at me when he added, "You always nap halfway through dinner anyway." His voice was flat, like a waiter explaining that the kitchen had just closed. My knees bent slightly. I had not realized I had been holding my breath. My own daughter chimed in, setting her wine glass down. "Let's vote. Who actually wants her at the table?" For a moment I believed it was a test, a cruel little game they would all immediately retract, but they did not. One by one, hands went up, calm, casual, as if they were voting on pizza toppings. Nobody looked at me. Not a single one of them, not even the children. I looked down at the plate in my hand, suddenly too heavy. My fingers brushed the edge of my napkin and I pulled it out just to hold on to something that was mine. There was the name Jeremy, Jeremy made with love that once mattered. Jeremy cleared his throat and delivered the final blow. "You're not really family anymore. Just a chapter we don't want to reread." I did not cry. Not there. I folded the napkin and slid it back into my pocket. No one noticed. They pulled the final chair out, not for me, but for the dog, who leapt up eagerly. I was left standing, until someone muttered, "Just set her plate outside." And so they did. Out on the back deck, where the wind cut through the wooden slats like little knives, they set a folding chair and a paper plate, and shut the sliding door behind me. I sat. I held the plate on my lap as the cold bled through my thin sweater. From the inside, the lights glowed golden and soft. I could see their silhouettes moving, dancing almost, in the laughter. I could not hear the words, only the rhythm of them, like a song I once knew and was no longer invited to hum. The children ran past again. One of the little girls, sweet Lily, paused by the door and pressed her nose to the glass. "Why is Grandma outside?" Her mother tugged her away. "She's confused, just ignore her." The door slid shut. No one came out. I ate slowly, even though the food had cooled and congealed. The roast was dry, and the mashed potatoes were too salty, but I finished every bite, because pride does not keep you warm, but neither does hunger, and if that was to be my last family dinner, I would not leave my plate full. The stars were bright that night. I sat with my coat over my knees and watched my breath puff out in little clouds. For a moment, I thought of walking away, just slipping into the dark and never coming back. Maybe they would notice. Maybe they would not. I thought of my husband, long gone now, and the Christmases we used to host. He always said family was everything, but this was not family. This was performance. Cold and hollow and rehearsed. When the door finally creaked open again, it was not for me. It was Jeremy letting the dog out. He looked at me, startled, as if surprised I was still there. "You can go now," he said, as though dismissing a guest who had overstayed her welcome, and I did. I stood, brushed the crumbs from my lap, and left the napkin behind on the chair. But I took everything else with me, every word, every silence, every hand that rose against me, and I carried them like kindling into the long cold night. They thought they had taken my place at the table. They had no idea what I had built underneath it. I walked back to the small rental car I had driven that evening. It was parked 2 blocks away because Jeremy had told me we need space for the real guests' SUVs. I unlocked the door with frozen fingers and sat for a long while with the engine off, listening to the car creak in the cold. I remembered buying the land that house stood on years ago when Jeremy's mother was still in high school. I had worked 2 jobs, one cleaning ferry decks, the other sorting freight at the docks just to afford the down payment. I never told them that. I did not want their thanks, just their decency. Turns out, I could not even get that. Back at home, I made tea and sat by the window with the light off. The silence was loud in a way that hurt the ears. I thought of the old duffel bag in my attic, the one with the yacht documents still inside, the ones my husband and I never threw out because we always dreamed of sailing again. They had taken the table, yes, but not the ocean. The next morning I opened the bag. I pulled out the sealed folder, blew off the dust, and read my name, still printed boldly as the primary owner. I called the marina, I called an old friend, and then I called my lawyer. By nightfall, the yacht was mine again, the keys returned to my hand, and before New Year's it would be stocked with wine, bread, soft chairs, and all the silence I could ever need. Sweet, kind silence, where no one raised hands to vote me invisible. That was the last Christmas I spent near family, but it was the first one I spent free. I could not sleep that night. The cold from the deck still clung to my bones, but it was not the wind that kept me awake. It was the silence of realization that no one sees the woman who built the house when they are too busy redecorating it in their own names. I slipped off my shoes by the door and hung my coat on the hook I had carved with my husband's initials 50 years ago. The house was dark, but I did not turn on any lights. I did not need to. I had walked this path in my mind 100 times. The attic key was still hidden in the cookie jar, beneath a bag of stale peppermint drops. I climbed the creaking stairs and opened the old cedar trunk that smelled of thyme and mothballs. From it I pulled out the thick leather binder and the smaller key that fit the safe behind the hallway painting. No one knew it was there, not even my daughter. I turned the combination, 13, 24, 58. The year I was born, the year I married, the year I buried him. Inside the safe were 3 things. First, a faded photograph of Jeremy when he was 6, missing his front teeth, covered in chocolate from the cake I had made. I had taken that picture myself the day he told me he wanted to be a captain, like on the boats. I had believed him. Second, a letter from my husband, written in thick, careful script when the tremors had just begun. If they ever make you feel small, it said, remind them who taught them to stand. And third, the deed to Jeremy's house. Yes, his house, or so he called it. It was still in my name. My fingers traced the embossed seal, the mortgage stamp, the final payment signed by me. I sat down slowly in the hallway chair, the safe still open behind me, the letter folded neatly in my lap. A drizzle tapped lightly on the window, and I realized it had begun to rain. How fitting. My husband always said rain was cleansing. They thought they had erased me, moved me to the edge of their lives like an unwanted footnote. They forgot I had written the prologue. I was not born into wealth. I built it. In 1978, I co-founded the Harris River Line Shipping Company. I managed the scheduling, payroll, fuel contracts, everything. We were one of the first companies to move freight up the Tennessee River faster than the highways could. It was my idea to shift to passenger excursions in the spring. My idea that brought in the cruise licensing deal. Eventually, I sold my shares and stepped away, not because I had to, but because I wanted to give them space. I wanted to be the grandma who listens, not the one who lectures. I chose silence, thinking that was kindness. Turns out, silence taught them nothing but convenience. They grew up thinking generosity was owed, not offered. I opened the folder tucked at the back of the safe. Inside was something no one in the family had ever known, a deed and partnership contract for a certain vacation villa in Gatlinburg, the one Jeremy always bragged about, the one he took his colleagues to every spring, the one they claimed as our family's retreat. It was mine. More specifically, 70% of it still was. I had purchased it 15 years ago, under the family trust, to avoid inheritance tax later, but the family trust only had one living trustee, me. They used it freely, hosted parties, redecorated it in modern stone and slate, and never once asked how it came to be. I suppose it is easier to assume comfort was always yours than to consider who paid for it. I looked at the clock. 2:57 a.m. By 3 o'clock I was dialing. "Ma'am?" came the sleepy voice on the other end. "This is the middle of the night." "This is also the end of a lie," I said. "We need to move my holdings into a different structure. I want to revoke all personal access from non-stakeholders. No more silent giving." A pause. "Would you like to come in next week?" "No," I said. "I'd like to finalize the paperwork before sunrise. Fax me whatever you must. I'll sign it now." By 4:30 a.m., I had converted the villa into a commercial asset under a private entity bearing my name. Any family member not listed as a business partner would be formally locked out. That included Jeremy. That included every single one of them. The process triggered a notification clause, something we had built in years ago. By the time they would finish their Christmas brunch and toast their mimosas, they would receive an email stating that the villa had been reclaimed for operational restructuring. I imagined the confusion, the hurried phone calls, the panic, the realization that Grandma still owned the ground they were standing on. I walked back into the living room and looked around. The same room where I had rocked Jeremy to sleep in a patched blue blanket. The same room where my daughter had painted the walls pale green. The same room where my husband had asked me, through tears, if I would be all right alone. "I will be," I whispered, "starting now." I took the linen napkin out of my coat pocket, the one with Jeremy's name stitched in blue. I placed it gently into the fire. It curled quickly, turning to ash in seconds, and then I smiled for the first time that night. By morning, I was no longer sad. I was awake, wide awake. Jeremy's voicemail came in just after 8 a.m., frantic and clipped. "Grandma, we just got an email from some legal firm saying the villa's access is revoked. What's going on?" He didn't even say good morning. His wife took over the phone halfway through the message, yelling, "This is blackmail. We already booked New Year's Eve." I didn't call back. I simply replied with one text, "This is ownership." I stood by the window of my quiet little house, watching the rain ease into a soft drizzle. My fingers traced the edge of the mug I had used for over 30 years, chipped, faded, but still mine, like me. I took a long sip, let the heat fill the hollow in my chest they had carved out the night before. They thought I was some relic that came with the wallpaper. They forgot who built the walls. The villa, my villa, was where I once nursed my husband through his final winter. He wanted to pass somewhere warm, somewhere near water, and I made that happen. I sold half of Harris River Transport for it. I bought the land, the wood, the beams, and I supervised every nail that went into the place. Jeremy was just 12 when we laid the cornerstone together. He wore little gloves and a lopsided helmet. He said, "One day, I'll bring my wife and kids here, Grandma." I had smiled and said, "Then one day, this will be yours." I had meant it. I had intended to leave it to him. That was before his voice became ice and his hands stopped reaching for mine. That was before he voted me off my own Christmas table like I was some mistake in the family album. Now, I was no longer giving anything in silence. I went to the study and opened the big leather ledger. I hadn't touched it in years. That villa, its land title, operation license, maintenance, was still 70% in my name. They used it like it was theirs, celebrated there. Filmed Instagram videos with champagne by the fireplace I'd built. It would now be converted into a luxury short-stay retreat for the elderly, fully managed, income-generating. No more family access. No more silent entitlement. My lawyer sent the enforcement letters at dawn. I included a small clause at the end. Anyone who challenged the ownership without written consent would be legally barred from the premises for life. Let them book New Year's somewhere else. Maybe they could nap halfway through dinner without worrying about Grandma spoiling the view. But even that wasn't enough. Not yet. I opened another drawer, one I hadn't touched since the funeral. Inside was a set of keys tied with a faded blue ribbon. The Harris Grace. Our boat. Our dream. Harlan and I had bought it when we turned 50, an old mid-deck cruiser we restored with our own hands. It had been sitting in a private dock for over a decade, maintained quietly under my name. I had always thought I would never return to it, that without him it meant nothing. But that morning, it felt like home. I made some calls. A few dock staff I knew, a cleaning company, a florist. I arranged for groceries, fuel, clean sheets, and a few extra bottles of the kind of wine you never drink when you're playing small. Then I wrote a list of names. Helen, who raised her twin grandsons after her daughter vanished. and now lives alone in a studio apartment with a broken heater. Dolores, whose children only show up for bank transfers and always forget her birthday. Ruth, whose son signed her into assisted living and sold her house the same week. I sent them each an invitation, 1 page, handwritten, folded with a gold ribbon. Join me for a weekend of peace, laughter, and no apologies. Harris Grace departs Friday at noon. By evening, my phone started ringing. At first, I thought they would say no, but they cried, they thanked me, they asked what to bring. I told them to bring nothing except their hearts and one story they had never told anyone. That weekend, we stood together on the top deck of the Harris Grace, watching the sun melt into the river. Dolores raised her glass and in her deep, worn-out voice said, "We used to raise families. Now we raise glasses, finally for ourselves." We all laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was real. It was the sound of our bones remembering they still had joy left in them. No one mentioned their children. No one cried about being forgotten. We talked about books, about old crushes, about recipes. We danced, slowly, clumsily, like girls who had earned the right not to care. The boat cut through the water like a promise, and I finally understood. I was never looking for a seat at their table. I just forgot I could build my own. And oh, how sweet freedom tastes when it's chilled in champagne. They could not stand it, the silence. Not when I was smiling. Not when I was visible again. So they tried to rewrite the ending. 3 days after we docked the Harris Grace, I received a formal notice, legal claim regarding the misappropriation of family property. Jeremy's name was at the top. Just below it, my eldest great-granddaughter, 18 years old, barely out of high school, already signing lawsuits against the woman who bought her diapers once. I stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. I did not cry. Not anymore. Later that day, I found their version of the truth online. Posted like a tabloid headline across social media, "Our grandmother stole our family's boat while suffering memory loss. Please help us get justice." Hundreds of shares, thousands of comments, hashtags like elder abuse and protect our family. Some people sent me death threats. Others told me to give back what I stole. My neighbors started whispering. The pharmacy clerk avoided my eyes. They had done it. They had turned me from the forgotten matriarch into a public thief. But they forgot one thing. I kept everything. I had always kept everything. Every document, every receipt, every photograph, every whispered promise from a man who loved me when I was young, strong, and fearless, and never stopped, even when I forgot who I was. The Harris Grace had been mine since 1988. Harlan and I bought it with the first big payment from my river shipping business. It was registered in both our names until he transferred it fully to me in 2007, just after his diagnosis. "If I go first," he said, "I want you to still hear my voice when you step on deck." I had that moment, recorded on an old mini DV tape, grainy, shaky, but there, his voice, his laugh, him holding the pen and signing the form with my name on it. At the courthouse, the judge looked tired. She adjusted her glasses when I walked in with my lawyer. Jeremy and his daughter sat across the aisle. She wore heels too tall for someone her age. He wore smugness like a tie. My lawyer asked me if I wanted to make a statement. I nodded. "I am 80 years old. I raised Jeremy while working double shifts on the docks. I used to sew patches on his jeans and warm his milk before bed. My husband and I built a life from nothing. We didn't inherit wealth. We shoveled it out of mud and water, one crate at a time." I placed the documents on the table. Original bill of sale from 1988. Boat registry in both names. Transfer of ownership in 2007, witnessed, notarized, filed. Then I placed the USB stick on top. It was quiet as the courtroom watched the screen. Harlan's voice filled the speakers, crackly and real. "You know this is all yours, Joe. If I go first, I don't want you to ask permission to remember me." The camera shook a little, then steadied on him signing the papers. "You don't owe anyone a damn thing." I looked at Jeremy. His eyes didn't flinch, but his jaw twitched. The judge folded her hands. She didn't even ask any more questions. Her ruling was swift. "All claims of misappropriation are hereby dismissed. The court finds the plaintiff's accusations baseless. Counterclaim for defamation and legal fees awarded to the defendant." Mr. Jeremy Harris and Miss Emily Harris are ordered to pay $28,400, 0 cents in damages plus costs. It was over in 12 minutes. But outside that courthouse, it had only just begun. Reporters were waiting. I had declined interviews before, but this time I looked right at the cameras. I didn't steal anything. I built it. I earned it. And I still remember how to protect it. The story exploded online. Grandmother accused of theft proves ownership with husband's dying words. The original post Jeremy had written was deleted, but not before screenshots had been saved, reshared, mocked, and turned into TikToks with captions like, "She's not forgetful. She's just done." Jeremy stopped calling. So did the rest of them. That evening, I walked down to the dock with a bottle of wine. Dolores met me with 2 glasses. We sat on the deck of the Harris Grace while the town lights shimmered on the water. "They called you crazy," she said, clinking her glass with mine. "You showed them history." "No," I said softly. "I showed them memory. With receipts." We toasted under a full moon. I did not feel like a victim. I felt like a lighthouse. Still. Lit. Seen. And if they wanted to keep calling me cold, cruel, or forgetful, I would let them. Because I remembered everything now. And I was finally done pretending I had forgotten. I used to spend Christmas cleaning up after people who did not see me. I used to cook while they laughed. I used to give gifts that went unopened and unheard, stories that died before they reached the table. But not this year, not ever again. The sun was melting into the horizon, painting the sky with burnt orange and defiant gold. I stood at the stern of the Harris Grace, my old bones warmed not by youth, but by something better. Liberation. The champagne in my hand sparkled. It was not just about bubbles and celebration. It was about claiming a life I had been denied for too long. All around me, the deck was filled with women and men who had been left behind like I had. Forgotten parents, pushed aside grandparents, widows with too many memories, veterans with no calls on birthdays, former teachers, nurses, mothers, fathers, now captains of their own hour. "This sunset's got nothing on you, Joyce," said Betty, who used to be a librarian until her kids put her in a home with no books. "You always say that when you want another glass," I teased, pouring her one anyway. We clinked our drinks together, and I said, loud enough for them all to hear, "I raised them with love. They raised their hands to erase me. I choose peace." There were nods, some tears, but also laughter. For the first time in years, I was surrounded not by people who tolerated my presence, but by those who saw it as a blessing. Earlier that week, I had met a woman named Millie in a senior center downtown. Her daughter had left her there after promising to return the next day. That was in 2019. She still kept her hair in curls every Sunday, just in case. I brought her on board myself. Now she was sitting next to Dolores, watching the sea, sharing jokes I had not heard in years. I walked slowly toward the table at the front of the deck, where a small brass plaque had just been installed. It read, "The Harris Grace, reclaimed, restored, reborn." Below it, "In memory of Harlan James, in defiance of silence." Next to it, a silver envelope lay, unopened. Inside was something that would outlive this moment. I tapped my glass with a spoon. Everyone turned. "I want to tell you about a new beginning," I said. "Not just mine, ours." They listened. "We are not burdens," I said. "We are not background noise to their shiny new holidays. We are not mistakes to be hidden away." I lifted the envelope. "I've set up a fund. It's called Grace Second Chances. It will offer weekend retreats on this very boat, free of charge, for any senior who's been cast aside. We'll partner with care homes, social workers, libraries, wherever we can find the forgotten." The applause was not loud. It was quiet, respectful, deep, and it filled me more than any gift I had ever received. After they settled again, I added, "They called me a burden. I call this freedom." Someone handed me a candle, already lit, then another. One by one, we each lit our own and stood in a circle at the deck's edge. "I want you to remember something," I said. "If they pushed you out, it's not because you lost value, it's because they lost sight. That's not on you. It never was." We let the candles drift into the water, hundreds of tiny flames dancing out into the sea, for the ones who couldn't be here, for the ones still waiting, for the ones who might never get free. Betty sniffled. You're going to make us cry into our champagne, Joe. I smiled. Let it fizz with purpose, then. As the stars blinked into the sky and the engine hummed quietly beneath us, I looked out at the wide-open dark. There were no walls here, no tables I wasn't allowed to sit at, no votes, no doors closed quietly in my face. Only water, and wind, and freedom. The wind caught the ends of my red shawl, the same one I had worn that Christmas night, the one they made jokes about. I wore it proudly now, its loose threads flying like battle flags. Someone played a slow tune on a harmonica. Dolores hummed along. Millie danced, holding the hands of a man who used to be a mail carrier and now could not remember his zip code but still remembered how to lead. I sat beside the helm and watched. I did not feel old, I felt full. Tomorrow there would be more calls from lawyers, more headlines maybe. Jeremy might even try again. I no longer cared, because in the end I had not lost a family. I had built a new one, and this time no one would dare tell me there was no seat. I should have known they would come in costume. Jeremy showed up first, hair neatly combed, shirt tucked in, holding a bouquet of lilies as if flowers could cover the rot in his soul. Behind him trailed Melissa, my eldest granddaughter. She had a tin of cookies in one hand and her best fake smile in the other. Grandma, Jeremy said, stepping onto the dock, we've been doing a lot of thinking. I stood near the edge of the Harris Grace, watching the gangplank lower. The breeze carried the scent of the ocean, clean and indifferent. I said nothing. He handed me the flowers. We were wrong about everything. Melissa and I want to make things right. And Melissa added, this boat, it belongs to you, obviously, but we were wondering if, maybe, you'd consider passing it down while you're still with us. She said it sweetly, soft as poisoned honey. Ha! I didn't blink. You mean sign it over now, before I become inconvenient again? Jeremy laughed nervously. No, it's just that the taxes and upkeep are hard for someone your age. We could handle it for you. You think I cannot handle my own freedom? I asked. He stiffened. We just don't want you to be alone, Grandma. I'm not. I turned and began walking back toward the deck. That should have been the end of it, but Jeremy followed, and his voice changed. If we can't have it, he said, then no one can. Something in me froze. Then he lunged. His hands shoved against my back, harder than I thought he could push. My body jolted forward, my shoes scraped against the polished teak wood of the deck. I slipped. The rail struck my ribs, and for one sickening second the world tilted. I was weightless, falling. My fingers caught the cold iron of the railing, dangling. The ocean was roaring beneath me, black and merciless. I heard Melissa gasp, not in horror, but in frustration. Jeremy, pull her down. Just let go of her. But then a new voice shouted, back away from her. It was Sam, 76 years old, former fire captain, wore suspenders like armor and walked with a limp that never slowed him down. He barreled forward with the fury of someone who had saved lives for decades and was not about to stop now. He grabbed Jeremy by the shoulder, yanked him back, and threw him against the side mast. Melissa screamed. Sam turned to me. Joyce, hold on. With shaking hands, he reached down, gripped my wrists, and with a grunt, pulled me up over the railing, back onto the deck. I collapsed into his arms. Security came running. He thought the camera was off, but Sam had backed everything up. One of the crew had already called the police. Another had checked the deck cameras, recording everything in perfect, high-definition truth. Jeremy and Melissa were arrested on the spot. The next few days moved like thunder, loud, fast, and impossible to ignore. I pressed charges for attempted murder and criminal conspiracy to seize property. My lawyers filed every motion with precision. I gave my statement under oath and didn't shed a single tear. Melissa tried to plead insanity. Jeremy claimed I tripped, and Sam overreacted, but the footage was undeniable. The trial became a headline. Millionaire grandmother nearly killed over luxury yacht by her own family. I never wanted the fame, but I welcomed the justice. In court, the footage played, frame by frame, the shove, the sneer, my hands clawing for grip, Melissa's voice, cold and clear. Just let go of her. The jury didn't take long. Guilty, sentenced, publicly shamed, and for the first time in their lives, they faced something they could not manipulate: consequences. Outside the courthouse, a reporter asked me, "Do you have anything to say to your grandchildren?" I looked into the camera, calm, clear. "They came for blood," I said. "They forgot who built the ship they tried to sink." That night, back on the Harris Grace, Sam handed me a glass of wine. The same deck, the same sunset. "You good?" he asked. I nodded. "They came to bury me, Sam." "And?" "They forgot I'm not done living yet." The sentence came down on a Thursday. 6 months of probation for Jeremy and Melissa, 1 full year of court-mandated community service, and the part that truly mattered most to me, an official restraining order. They were prohibited from contacting me in any form. No calls, no visits, no letters. Not even a birthday card slipped under the door. When the judge read the final verdict, Jeremy didn't flinch. Melissa cried, but not for me, for herself. The courtroom emptied. Their names were all over the news by nightfall. Millionaire matriarch survives family attack, turns her yacht into a second-chance sanctuary. From balcony to beacon, how one grandma fought back. I did not just survive Christmas. I rewrote it. I never asked for the spotlight. I asked for a seat. But when no one left one for me, I built the damn table myself. It was Sam who helped me pick the name. We sat one evening in the captain's lounge, our legs covered in soft wool blankets, nursing mugs of strong coffee. "What will you call it?" he asked. I looked out at the open sea, the fading line between water and sky. "Second table," he raised a brow. "That sounds like a restaurant." "No," I smiled. "It sounds like hope, for the ones who never got invited the first time." That winter, the Harris Grace became more than a yacht. We outfitted it with long benches, handmade quilts, shelves of donated books, and a full kitchen that ran on kindness and memories. Every month, I hosted retreats for seniors who'd been discarded, dismissed, or just plain forgotten. One woman came after sleeping in her car for a year. Her son said she used up her usefulness. A man arrived who hadn't spoken to a family member in over a decade. They only texted him when someone died. They came with nothing. They left with something no court could assign: dignity. We painted a sign across the stern of the ship: "Second table, all are welcome. No RSVP required." I started writing, too, not to be published, just to remember. But one of the volunteers, a retired librarian, read my pages and insisted the world needed to see them. So we printed a few copies of my memoir and titled it exactly how I felt. They taught me loneliness. I taught them dignity. In it, I wrote, "I was told to sit outside so I would not disturb the holiday spirit, but the cold taught me that real warmth does not live inside 4 walls or fake smiles. It lives in the hand that reaches for yours without a reason." They looked at me like a burden. I became a beacon. Now and then I still think of Jeremy as a boy, his tiny hands gripping the hem of my skirt, his wide eyes asking for bedtime stories, his giggle whenever I tickled behind his ear. I do not hate that child, but the man he became, that man will never sit at my table again. I suppose we all carry 2 selves, the one we were and the one we chose to be. As for me, I chose peace. I chose to gather strangers and remind them they are seen. I chose to laugh on deck under string lights and to toast to survival rather than perfection. I chose to build a table so wide, so open, that no one could ever say again, "There's no room for you." And when a young girl from the community center visited second table last month with her grandmother, she asked me why I had started all of this. I knelt beside her and said simply, "Because sometimes, little one, the only way to stop being forgotten is to remember yourself first. And that is a seat worth keeping. If you've ever been made to feel like a burden, remember, you don't need their table. You can build your own and raise a glass to the peace they never gave you." Don't forget to subscribe to Grandma, true stories for more tales of strength, wisdom, and the kind of sweet revenge only experience can serve.